Universal grammar is the genetic basis of language. If you ask the question, what genes are involved, that's an almost impossible question. In fact, if you talk to biologists and asked, how do you determine which are the genes that are involved even in simple traits, having blue eyes, it's called fiendishly difficult. The transition from a genome to an organism is a very complex process which is barely understood. Genes actually just code for proteins. Then the proteins do something. They begin to fold in strange ways. They affect something else. After all, you start getting a process of growth. But if you're asking about the genes for language, any effort to find that is in the very remote distance. Genetics just isn't advanced that far. I'm here to talk about genes for language, but that's just a joke.
And what future do you see or expect for this approach?
What do I expect for which
What is
approach?
going to happen for the generative theory?
For the generative theory? Well, there's a huge amount of work to be done just to try to figure out how the apparently diverse languages of the world actually fit the same mold. We're beginning to think that they do, but to show it is an immense project. There's extremely interesting work that's going to be put, it's in press, will come out pretty soon by Ian Roberts, British linguist, who studied thousands of languages and has a very interesting theory to account for how the process of picking out which points of differentiation among languages are acquired in sequence. It's been a big problem to ask how anybody can ever learn this. There are many differentiations. How does the child work through that set and find a particular one? He has some very striking results on that. An Italian linguist, Longobardi, has also done similar work and come out with complementary results. In the areas of syntax and semantics, an awful lot is just not known at all. There's good reason to believe that they follow the rules of the things we're beginning to understand. But to demonstrate that is a massive project. Also, simply to ask a very simple question. Take coordination. I met a tall, young, angry man in languages where adjectives are post-nominal, most languages. So the equivalent of I met a man, young, tall, angry, eager to go to Europe and so on. You can get a sequence of adjectives which is unbounded, can be of any length, has no internal structure, just they're like beads on a string. And each one is predicated individually of the same noun. How to handle that is a very complex problem. And none of the rule systems that people know about or have thought about happen to accommodate that. All right, that's another fundamental question. You can go on listing them. There are lots of mysterious things about language. Some of them we'll probably never understand. Like, how is it possible? Let's go back to that formula of Wilhelm von Humboldt that I mentioned. Infinite use of finite means. Part of that we can understand, how a finite object can generate an infinite number of entities. But that's not what he was talking about. He was talking about infinite use. How do you make infinite use? How does finite means allow innovative, creative, novel use? How can you make up a new sentence appropriate to some new situation. Nobody has any idea about that. It's just like how can you decide to lift your finger? Nobody has any idea. We can look into the mechanisms that make it work, but we have no idea about how you make the decision. These things like this are beyond the range of current science altogether, or maybe of any human science. So there's an endless number of mysteries to explore as soon as you begin to think about what's going on. And if you ask about the future of the field, it'll be trying to plunge into these depths and see how much of it you can make some sense out of.